Article 4A-209, acceptance of payment order. Subject to subsection D, a receiving bank other than the beneficiary's bank accepts a payment order when it executes the order. Receiving bank other than the beneficiary's bank accepts a payment order. Okay. Subject to subsection C and D, a beneficiary's bank accepts a payment order at the earliest of the following times. 1. When a bank, 1, pays the beneficiary as stated in section 4A-405A or 4A-405B, or 2, notifies the beneficiary of receipt of the order or that the account of the beneficiary has been credited with respect to the order unless the notice indicates that the bank is rejecting the order or that funds with respect to the order may not be withdrawn or used until receipt of payment from the sender of the order. When the bank receives payment of the entire amount of the sender's order pursuant to section 4A-403. And 3, the opening of the next funds transfer business day of the bank following the payment date of the order if, at the time, the amount of the sender's order is fully covered by the withdrawable credit balance in an authorized account of the sender, or the bank has otherwise received full payment from the sender, unless the order was rejected before that time or is rejected within 1 hour after that time or 1 hour after the opening of the next business day of the sender following the payment date if that time is later. If notice of rejection is received by the sender after the payment date and the authorized account of the sender does not bear interest, the bank is obliged to pay interest to the sender on the amount of the order for the number of days elapsing after the payment date to the day the sender received notice or learns that the order was not accepted, counting that day as an elapsed day. If the withdrawable credit balance during that period falls below the amount of the order, the amount of interest payable is reduced accordingly. Acceptance of a payment order cannot occur before the order is received by the receiving bank. Acceptance does not occur under subsection B2 or B3 if the beneficiary of the payment order does not have an account with the receiving bank. The account has been closed or the receiving bank is not permitted by law to receive credits for the beneficiary's account. A payment order issued to the originator's bank cannot be accepted until the payment date if the bank is the beneficiary's bank. A payment order issued to the originator's bank cannot be accepted until the payment date if the bank is the beneficiary bank, or the execution date if the bank is not the beneficiary's bank. Hang on. A payment order issued to the originator's bank, drawn it, so the originator's drawn it on his own bank account like a check, cannot be accepted until the payment date if the bank is the beneficiary's bank, or the execution date if the bank is not the beneficiary's bank. I don't understand that. If the originator's bank executes the original payment order before the execution date or pays the beneficiary of the originator's payment order before the payment date and the payment order is subsequently cancelled pursuant to section 4A-211B, the bank may recover from the beneficiary any payment received to the extent allowable by the law governing mistaken restitution. 4A-210. Rejection of payment order. A payment order is rejected by the receiving bank by a notice of rejection transmitted to the sender orally, electronically, or in writing. A notice of rejection need not use any particular words and is sufficient if it indicates that the receiving bank is rejecting the order or will not execute or pay the order. Rejection is effective when the notice is given if transmission is by a means that is reasonable in the circumstances. If notice of rejection is given by a means that is not reasonable, rejection is effective when the notice is received. If an agreement of the sender and receiving bank establishes the means to be used to reject a payment order, 1. Any means complying with the agreement is reasonable, and 2. Any means not complying is not reasonable unless no significant delay in receipt of the notice resulted from the use of the non-compliant means. B. This subjection applies if receiving bank other than the beneficiary's bank fails to execute a payment order despite the existence on the execution date of withdrawable credit balance is an authorized account of the sender sufficient to cover the order. If the sender does not receive notice of rejection of the order on the execution date and the authorized account of the sender does not bear interest, the bank is obliged to pay interest to the sender on the amount of the order for the number of days elapsing after the execution date to the earlier of the day the order is cancelled pursuant to section 4A-211D, or the day the sender receives notice or learns that the order was not executed, counting the final day of the period as an elapsed day. If the withdrawable credit balance during that period falls below the amount of the order, the amount of interest is reduced accordingly. If a receiving bank suspends payment, all unaccepted payment orders issued to it are deemed rejected at the time the bank suspends payments. Acceptance of a payment order precludes a later rejection of the order. Rejection of a payment order precludes a later acceptance of the order. If a receiving bank suspends payments, all unaccepted payment orders issued to it are deemed rejected at the time the bank suspends payments. Acceptance of a payment order precludes a later rejection of the order. Rejection of a payment order precludes a later acceptance of the order. 4A-211, cancellation and amendment of payment order. A communication of the sender of a payment order cancelling or amending the order may be transmitted to the receiving bank orally, electronically, or in writing. If a security procedure is in effect between the sender and the receiving bank, the communication is not effective to cancel or amend the order unless the communication is verified pursuant to the security procedure or the bank agrees to the cancellation or amendment. Subject to subsection A, a communication by the sender cancelling or amending a payment order is effective to cancel or amend the order if notice of the communication is received at the time and in a manner affording the receiving bank a reasonable opportunity to act on the communication before the bank accepts the payment order. After the payment order has been accepted, cancellation or amendment of the order is not effective unless the receiving bank agrees or funds transfer system rule allows cancellation or amendment without agreement of the bank. With respect to a payment order accepted by a receiving bank other than the beneficiary bank, cancellation or amendment is not effective unless a confirmation cancellation or amendment of the payment order issued by the receiving bank is also made. With respect to a payment order accepted by the beneficiary's bank, cancellation or amendment is not effective unless the order was issued in execution of an unauthorized payment order, or because of a mistake by a sender if the funds transfer which resulted in the issuance of a payment order, that is a duplicate of a payment order previously issued by the sender. 2. That the order's payment to a beneficiary not entitled to receive payment from the originator, or 3. That orders payment in an amount greater than the amount of beneficiary was entitled to receive from the originator. If the payment order is cancelled or amended, the beneficiary's bank is entitled to recover the beneficiary any amount paid to the beneficiary the extent allowed by the law governing mistaken restitution. An unaccepted payment order is cancelled by operation of law at the close of the 5th funds transfer business day of the receiving bank after the execution date or payment date of the order. A cancelled payment order cannot be accepted if an accepted payment order is cancelled. The acceptance is nullified and no person has any right or obligation based on the acceptance. Amendment of a payment order is deemed to be cancellation of the original order at the time of amendment and issue of a new payment order in the amended form at the same time, unless otherwise provided in an agreement of the parties or in a funds transfer system rule. If the receiving bank, after accepting a payment order, agrees to cancellation or amendment of the order by a sender, or is bound by a funds transfer system rule allowing cancellation or amendment without the bank's agreement, the sender, whether or not cancellation or amendment is effective, is liable to the bank for any loss and expenses, including reasonable alternative fees incurred by the bank as a result of the cancellation or amendment, or attempted cancellation or amendment. A payment order is not revoked by the death of a legal incapacity of the sender unless the receiving bank knows of the death of the or of an adjudication of incapacity by a court of competent jurisdiction as a reasonable opportunity to act before acceptance of the order. A fund transfer system rule is not effective to the extent it conflicts with subsection C2. 4A-212, liability and duty of receiving bank regarding unaccepted payment order. If receiving bank fails to accept a payment order that it is obliged to express agreement to accept, the bank is liable for breach of the agreement to the extent provided in the agreement or in this article, but does not otherwise have any duty to accept a payment order or, before acceptance, to take any action or refrain from taking action with respect to the order except as provided in this article or by express agreement. Liability based on acceptance arises only when acceptance occurs as stated in section 4A-209, and liability is limited to that provided in this article. A receiving bank is not the agent of the sender or beneficiary of the payment order it accepts or of any other party to the funds transfer, and the bank owes no duty to any party to the funds transfer except as provided in this article or by express agreement. Right, see you in the next video for part 3, execution of sender's payment order by receiving bank.